All right. So, hello everyone on your lunch break, if it's a lunch break, or in your afternoon. Just tell me if it's now sharing the PPT, because I just move the.
Yeah, we can see everything.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Very good. Very good. So, welcome today for analytics as a product. In fact, we gave it this name a while back with Kevin, but then I revisited it. And maybe if I went back today, I would say it goes much broader than just analytics, but data as a product. So think of it in the wider terms as well as we go. So I think the content is like fairly applicable to a wider definition than just saying analytics, but much more in like data sense. So the subtitle being why should I care and maybe where to start. So a bit of background why is me even talking about it today and why data as a product. So my background is in purchasing. I was purchasing displays and electronics for Volkswagen and Skoda cars. So if you're driving a Skoda today, chances are if there's a display, it's something I purchased many years ago, because that's how long the R&D process takes. I was a political scientist by educational background, which I do find super beneficial today in my data career. When I moved from automotive, when I saw it being like super ineffective and super just like, I look out a window, sort of thinking direction of like, how's the weather today? And like, that's my decisioning. And I was like, okay, I do want to be able to help companies decide a bit better going forwards in my career. And that's when I started consulting. I upskilled for data in like the technology part, and spent several years consulting, helping companies build their data stacks, but also upskill their teams, also build their data strategies, and stuff like this. And while personally I started feeling like I'm much more, developing these skills and getting confident as I go throughout the years, at the same time I started having more and more questions around, we got all this great, accessible, flexible tech, which is decreasing in price. So really even smaller and smaller companies can afford to have it. But how are we actually making sure that people use it effectively? How are we really getting the business value out of what we have, and how we structure things on the technical side? And what particularly caught my attention is like what sets companies apart when they are really this like data informed / data driven versus the companies that are just unable to make this switch. And so that's where I started exploring this concept of data or analytics as a product, because I do believe that product management practices do have a lot to provide for data professionals and for organizations that are interested in being data informed. Today I work in a company called NMI. We do payments. I joined to set our product analytics roadmap in place and in motion, and it's been lots of fun so far. So about today, I would say like your experience is super valuable for this topic, because as I said, I do like to think about and I do like to implement lots of practices and principles in the product management way in data domain. But it doesn't mean that what I do is, that's the best way to do it. I'd still like to very much explore how others do things and what hurdles they experience, and think about what else could be done to really bridge these gaps. So I do think that your experiences are going to be valuable both to myself and also for the others in the group. So if you at any point feel like, hey, yes, I came across this and I thought about it, this is my take on it, this is what we tried, this is what we failed, please just jump in. Like, don't wait for anything. I'm not even sure I'm gonna see any like raised hands in the presenter mode, so just like say, hey, Barbara, you know, my take on is this. I'm really going to appreciate that. So don't be shy. And yeah, again, like I don't have all the answers. I really love to experiment with these things and create playbooks so that as an organization or as a data community, we can learn and have these repeatable successes without reinventing the wheel. But I definitely don't have all the answers. All right, to get the flows going, I would also love to know who is in the room today with me. So in my attempt on scribbling over pictures, if you are less than 2 years in data, and these categories, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, so whatever you feel like the most. If you're in data or in analytics less than 2 years, thumbs up. If you've been in data for two plus years and you're an individual contributor, that's a heart. If you are a manager or lead in the data domain, just clap. And if you are getting into the domain, that would be this tongue smiley. If you're product, on the other hand, rather than data, like a pure product, I would really love to know that. Or if you do something completely different. So go ahead and press your smileys. And again, I'm just wondering what I'm actually gonna see. So I do see some newcomers into the field. Okay, how about the others? Anyone who hasn't yet put their clappy clap, Erica. So I see we do have people in lead positions or in manager lead position in data. Okay, cool. Thanks for that. I'm gonna try to modify some of the things that as we go, like how we talk about it based on the audience. So it's really valuable to see. All right. So this is quite a current screenshot with my conversation with my colleague. Let's call them Jane. I asked the question if in the company what are we actually doing with NPS surveys data, and Jane, who is in our operations, sitting in our operations domain and say data analyst, replied to me that they are not entirely certain whether, if anything, outside of maybe some Power BI reports that currently use NPS data. Does that sound familiar to you, that people who actually sit within the domain and they should and are the domain specialists, don't really have an overview of all the data assets that they got in the area? Is that something you can relate to? And just feel free to shout, really, like, no, this doesn't really happen ever in my company, which would be ideal. Or okay, well, it does happen to me, and it's not the first time that this happened. Can you think of any other can you think of any other symptoms that we keep seeing in analytics / in the data domain, which might make the user experience and the experience we have with data in the company like really difficult to navigate? Thus, so we have here like dashboards that we don't know if they exist, and if they are maintained. What else? Do you have any other experiences like this?
Data not matching between different silos. So
Yep. Like numbers, you mean? So like the actual metric.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Classic. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that one. Yeah. What else? Any other tips?
So we've got some response in the chat there, Barbara.
Oh, okay, great. So would you mind reading it out for me?
Yeah, of course. So I've got number 1, knowing what data you should use. Number 2, different systems, so not being able to merge them and manual processes.
Yeah.
And then another lady has said compute capability challenges for big data.
Yeah, that as well. That as well, indeed. Indeed. My favorite one of those, and thank you for that. My favorite absolute one is the manual inputs. I can't.
Then another one, which is basic data literacy.
Definitely. Yeah. What else? Do we have anything else? Cool.
That's what we're going to chat for now.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for those. So to summarize it, and maybe some others, and again, this is not an exhaustive list, but those are things that I have noticed in all those organizations I was consulting with or where I was in-house, and where I think it leads, like what deficiencies in the organization or in the process it sort of points towards. We often see like slow and intransparent development. So say a user submits a request for a new dashboard, for new visualizations, for some enhancements, and then there is silence, or the team says like, we will work on it. Okay, silence. 1 week, 2 weeks, then the user comes back and be like, what's going on? and they're like, hey, well, yeah, we're gonna work on it when we have time and stuff like this. What I'm pinpointing it to very often is that in the data domain, very often the agile process is missing. The way how we know it from product engineering, from product development, very often that's not implemented. And what agile process gives us is this visibility into like, how are we building up stuff? So that's very often what it goes down to in large chunk. Stale dashboards or dashboards that don't match up is very often the result of lack of ownership of dashboards. And by ownership, I don't mean, hey, this is the person who built the dashboard, but this is actually the domain that owns not only the dashboard, but also the data sources that are underneath that. Who are the actual creators and the emitters of the data? We also find, and one of you mentioned, undefined and untested metrics we cannot trust, and inaccurate reporting. This goes more towards lack of ownership of the metrics themselves. So if marketing people are talking about return on investment, and they want to understand the return on investment, like they should be the ones providing you the guidelines of like, how are we measuring that? And how can we make sure when we are testing the data and testing those transformations that we are actually doing what we think we are doing? Again, the metric cannot be owned by a data analyst or anyone like that. The metric is always owned by the SME, because they understand what that metric really, really means and how are they using it to drive their decisions. So then we have stuff like inaccessible and stale data sets. I very often ascribe it, or I see it as a lack of ownership of data sources. I mentioned it in the dashboards previously, but let's just mention it here again for posterity. Like, data sources is not something that is owned by analytics or data people, because they are not the ones that can affect how data is emitted, or at least like that's how I've seen it in organizations that do it well, is like the data source is owned by whoever is emitting the data. So if when it comes to internal data sets, that's very often product engineering in the different, say, domains or subdomains of that company. But if we talk about data sets such as Salesforce, is clearly that it has to be sales, or it has to be someone who is using Salesforce, that they are the owners, because they're the only ones that can make sure that the data comes in the form that they're expecting, that the fields are filled the way that supports the quality levels that we are expecting. Another thing that I see quite often is inadequate use of tooling, and that sort of looks as what I call under and overkills in using tooling. So typically that would be using Spark clusters for calculations that can be done in Excel sheet, or quite the opposite, using Excel sheets for some large operational reporting that should be done in some much bigger, much more scalable way. And I think that goes very often to clarity on the analytics suite and to the lack of communication of how the suite should be functioning. We very often see like inadequate or insufficient methods, which is a bit similar, which might indicate like skill amongst the data tribe. Different roles in the data tribe, right? Goes from like data engineering, analytics engineering, data analysts, data scientists creating some preliminary models, or even like some ML ops people. And I do see that sometimes it's not very clear like how to interoperate between those roles and using the right methods for the right problems solved. And also one thing that I see very often is too many one-off requests that I mentioned in that I wrote here is very often I attribute it very often to like lack of skill amongst business audience, requesting things that are already living somewhere outside, like somewhere in the wild, like they already exist, but the business audience might not feel confident enough to extract those insights from the data assets that they already have. But let's switch it around. Like when I say a great digital product, that you or I love to use. What is your thoughts on like what constitutes great digital products? And feel free to write in the chat then, and Kevin, I would ask you to, if we got some answers, to just read it for me. Like if there is an app that you really love, or that you use very often, and what you feel great, what you find really great about it. Think of it like that.
So at the moment we're getting features of good products as opposed to named products. So just things like easy to use, easy to navigate, real-time data, like trusted, reliable data. But if anybody's got any actual names of products that they'd like, I think that's what Barbara's after.
Not necessarily names, but think of like your Spotify or whichever is your favorite app. Like, why is it your favorite app outside of saying, well, I like to listen to music, but why is Spotify maybe your choice outside of some other options or similar? So yeah, we've had some inputs around it. Reliable data. It's data that is always up to date. It solves some of our problems. Anything else?
So we've got an app specific one, which is Monzo, because it's easy to use for the core banking functions that the person wants to use it for.
Easy to use. Yeah. What else?
We have typing happening, just waiting.
Cool.
So Erica suggested a Naked Wines product because it provides data-driven recommendations.
Awesome. What else? Anything else? Cool. All right. Those are really great ones. I put a list in, again, hypothetic attempt at scribbles, but this is not exhausting list, but I see some of the really big ones as, first of all, it addresses my jobs to be done. So whoever mentioned the Monzo app, and it is super easy to use core banking in their app. My job to be done is I need to pay my friend for ordering something. I need to super easily set up my direct debits for my phone so I don't lose access to my phone when that doesn't go out. and similar things. And those are my, as users, jobs to be done. I need my phone to be paid. I need my friend to be paid. I need to be able to receive my salary. And the absolute core of everything is that my jobs to be done are addressed, right? Without that, regardless of how beautiful app you have, if it doesn't address my problems, if it doesn't solve my problems, it's probably not going to be the product I'm going to stick around with for long. It should be, it usually should be, or it usually is intuitive and slick. I think also someone of you mentioned it's like, it's nice, it's easy to use, and stuff like this. It should be available and accessible. So basically, if I press and it's crashing all the time, that's not accessible. Or maybe it's an app for people with specific needs, such as for older people, where I would expect that, you know, the design is made to be easy to be used, that like for that specific group, and so on. So that all goes through availability and accessibility. It should be predictable. I think it should be doing what I think it's doing. And that goes hand in hand with well documented, which someone of you mentioned in the previous one, where like, oh, I don't know what these things mean and I can't really access any documentation. I think a great product is well documented. That doesn't necessarily mean always having like a developer documentation. Retail user is not going to go to that, but that goes down to simple things like tooltips, you know, and short explanations, how a feature works. Maybe when there is new releases of new features, you got a pop-up that explains, or a little tutorial that explains you the new features and things like this. And the product should be trustworthy, which goes down in our case to all these, like, the data is tested, right? I know that if Monzo app shows me I have 1,500 on my bank account, it's really there. And it's not 1,600 and it's not 1,400. It really is 1,500. So I think lots of the areas of a great product, or lots of the parts of a great product can be sort of assigned to these domains. Again, there might be others. Also, different people might perceive it differently. But I think those are some of the really large ones. So if you think about data and analytics and on high level, what are some of the products that can be out there and what are some of their high level jobs to be done, is we often might want to model data for some powerful BI. So we might want to have visibility into our business, its operations, and its results, so that we can steer our steps as a business. There might be things like reintegrating insights back into our products to inform our to inform our customers, or stuff like creating new revenue streams, so building entirely new data products for monetization purposes, or stuff like powering operational systems with insights. That would be things, imagine like creating ideal customer profile as a data science model and reintegrating it in a system like Salesforce, so that salespeople, when they are doing outreach, they always have ideal customer profile that is specific and tailor-made for ourselves, that they always have it at hand and can use it as one of the factors of evaluating customers. So those are some of the typical data products that are in a customer in a company, and their high-level jobs to be done. All that is supported with a very solid data platform. That's always the heart of it. And then the hands of how we are using it is the people in both the data teams and the wider business community. So if we enter the product management and development and product operations into all this, this is sort of how I really like to think about it. Is on the bottom of this whole pyramid lies the product strategy. Like, what is our product for? What are our data assets and whatever we are creating? What is it? Who is it for? What is it for? What are the stories that we want to telling, and what are the problems we are solving with that? That's the most important questions that I feel like we need to be asking ourselves in the beginning when we start developing, way before we are starting to develop anything data related. Then you go one step further and you say, okay, what is the roadmap for these desired experiences? We might have, all these 4 elements in mind that this is something we want for our company, but all of that is not going to happen at the same time, and not everything is going to have data sets available to be built. For example, not everything is going to have the infrastructure available for it, and so we need a roadmap. Like, how are we going to get there? So say we are going to source data sets for this in Q1 next year, but we are actually going to start doing the build in the quarter after, or the quarter or even the following one. And with having this plan, you can much easier communicate stuff to the stakeholders who are outside of the core team that's building this, and B, you can pace yourself with all the other initiatives that are around there. Once you've got a roadmap, for breaking the roadmap into like smaller, more digestible, and the actually actionable parts is we like to do something that is called ideation and intake process. So what are the actual like smaller ideas that that are parts of these like larger data products? So think of it in product terminology, it's like, what are the features? Like, what are core features? What are things that are nice to have? And how is it, again, tying back to addressing the question of what problems are we solving? And then the intake part of this process is currently we operate in like a forum of both product managers and product engineers and the data folks, in which we gather twice a month and we go through some of the things that came from the ideation process. And we are like, okay, can we actually make sure that this is workable? Is this feasible from the technical perspective? Is this feasible from some sort of capacity perspective? Is this feasible from our infrastructure perspective? And as an outcome of this intake process is a decision if we are going to pursue this idea further or not. And then as a last step, we also do technical assessments of all that. Again, in this forum, which is business audience, which is data audience, and which is product engineering audience. Once we get through that, we do the build, we create all these assets, we create things that, such as documentations by design, we are starting on work on stuff like data contracts by design and things like this, but that's an entire separate chapter. After it starts something which I call having like operational and usage cadence. What happens often in companies is we build something, we build an asset, we build a dashboard, we build something, and we put it out there and we're like, hey, dear user, this is here, it's yours, use it. But that's not always what happens in real life. So this is where I love to be there present for the users and help them get in the habit of using the asset, sitting with them, reviewing, speaking with them with my data analyst hat on, saying, hey, you see these numbers, what do you think it means? Or what changes did you do? Like, what triggered this? Like, have these conversations really with them so that they start really thinking in these in the data terms. One of you mentioned saying like, hey, data literacy is very often missing. And I do think from what I've seen is people don't even realize what's missing until they have these conversations and they're like, oh yes, we are calculating these averages here, but I actually don't know why we are calculating averages. What is it telling me? Do I even need this metric, or do I need to look at it differently? And that very often this thinking doesn't start without prompting these conversations actively. So that's where that's what I call having like some sort of operational and usage cadence, like really repeatedly working with the business users. And on top of it sits something along the lines of building user skill set that is then helping these users upskill, helping to use the tooling that we provide, and things like this. All that, it should be underlined by things like standardized development process. That is when I was talking about, oh, we have intake and we do that together with product engineering and with product management, is because they are on a certain development cycle. And you as data, you can't really, or as analytics, you can't really work without having these people backing you and you working on the same development cycle as they do, which is also why you need the product strategy and the roadmap. Because when you're talking about standardizing dev process, that goes down to what is the development that our company is undergoing in other domains, and how can I be on the same life cycle with them? And what it doesn't work without, at least like what I see, is you really, really need like a world-class dev to data comms and conversations and relationships. And I do feel like this is in today's world, it's really like the job of people in the data tribe or the data community of practice to reach out to product engineering, to engineering, to R&D, and start having these conversations of like, how can we deliver these things together? Because you cannot do it without them. I'm gonna pause here. I think it's quite a lot to soak in. What's your thoughts, questions, disagreements, anything? And Gavin, if we get anything in the chat, I would again ask you please to.
Yep, keep an eye there for you.
Let me know. So let me ask a question, regardless of which domain you are now working in. Is there anything like product strategy and roadmap for, say, analytics in your companies or organizations if you work in non-for-profit or government orgs? Anyone? Okie doke. So let me
people are typing. So
okay, cool. Okay, then let's like that's no first. Yeah, we get time.
The first person has just said, yes, I work for tech companies. Analytics is super important. There is both a roadmap internally and externally for customer products. And two others are typing. Shamim says, same in ours. Financial services, same here. So it's fairly consistent at the moment.
That's great. That's great. Do you also have this sort of intake process that I was talking about? Do you do something along those lines, like have a common forum with the devs and PMs, or say any other business stakeholders in that sense? Because that's something I'm really looking to develop much more. So I would be happy to also get some like offline conversations, inputs. That would be super, super good. All right. Not sure we still got something coming in. If not,
I think this is related to the original question, but it's saying, having come from the software development side, there's a roadmap for this, but the needs formalized and aligned for analytics products.
Yep. So this is again, this is super common. Like you come to a company and they're like, we have a super well-defined process of like strategizing and road mapping our customer-facing products, like our core offerings, and they are super good at it, super transparent. You got their long-term roadmaps on the website. It's like super accessible to anyone. And then you're like, okay, so are you doing the same for analytics? And they're like, well, yeah, sort of. And then you start digging deeper and you're like, well, actually, no. Like nothing of the sorts, not just for customers, because that's not always needed. You don't always expose any analytics to your customers, but even internally to your colleagues. Like, so what's your, I ask you a question, like, what's your lead time from, say, an idea inbox to your internal customer actually having a dashboard in hand? And sometimes I get an answer with like lead time that is, in my opinion, quite long, but much more often we're like, I don't really know, and I don't know how I would find out. And I'm like, well, that's because this road mapping and this this entire process just doesn't exist inside of the organization. Okay, cool. Well, I wanted to give you really some meat and some like blueprint that I personally use in lots of situations. It is sort of sitting in between this roadmap for the desired experiences. It's the moment where you know what experiences you would like to provide long term, and this ideation process of like, how are you actually going to get there? So I do create something which I call data experience heat map. And this is where I'm asking ourselves always, like, what is the North Star of the experience we want to provide? What does a successful analytics experience do for us, and how does it look? And this is, if you remember those 4 elements, the 4 not elements, but the 4 areas where the data products very often end up being. I got here examples that are mapping to those 4. So monitor progress is this like having a good thorough analytics and business intelligence experience. Then allow actionable steps. This is where I was saying, like, oh, for example, imagine embedding ideal customer profile into Salesforce experience. So that's allowing this is really providing operational insights that the colleagues can act on immediately. Bringing in new revenue, that's the monetization part, and making us a go-to offering, which is we embed our analytics into the app or into wider experience that we provide, and that makes us the being on the top of the game. That's the slick and good experience. And then I do like to break down those into what like sub experiences those could be. So think of it as like, for monitoring progress, it can be stuff like report on sales effectiveness, monitor revenues and costs, like some of your basic things, make marketing ROI available, track the HR process, surface platform performance, infrastructure performance, and things like this. In the allow actionable steps, it could be something like optimize sales targeting. That's stuff like this ideal customer profile that I keep repeating myself on. Improve financial management, a treasury operations, and stuff like this, or enable sophisticated pricing. So like pricing models that are available to your colleagues on demand. And stuff like this. And then when you got this experience heat map, this is like, if I look 2 years ahead, those are the data experiences I want to be providing. And then I take these colors here, which I can't now interactively drag, but I'm like, so for each of these, I say, am I doing it bad and mark it that way? Am I not doing it well? And so on, until I'm really doing this one well. So I really color out these ones. And I still give myself the freedom to say, I'm not doing these and I will not do these. Even though we would really love to have it, this is not a priority, and we are not doing and we won't be doing. And then I'm using this framework every quarter as our QPRs or anything along those lines, where I go and reflect on how much have we moved in these experiences in the quarter. And how much do I want to, or like which of these areas do I want us to improve going forwards in the next quarter or in the next half a year? And I just mark them, I make them thicker and say like, hey, those are the focuses. Like those are the things that where I really want to move the needle. And everything else that comes in as requests and so on is always for me is secondary to what's here. And now I don't do this alone. We do have, again, this is part of this whole ideation and like road mapping process to give it visibility. For me to say like, I would really love to go and say like, hey, I want to allow smart pricing, but we don't have many of the other elements that much wider audience might benefit from. So this is really a collaborative process, and I'm just showing you this as a framework that I like to think about stuff and also showcase to others, because I think it's very, very transparent way of doing it. And then when I have this data experience heat map, I go to a next step and I do the same thing, saying like, what are the capabilities that I need in order to support these experiences and how far I am in doing these. So the question that I'm answering here, what is powering this success that I spoke about in the previous slide? And the practice is entirely the same. I go and here in the first step, I say, I really want to focus on optimizing sales targeting by building an ideal customer profile that is going to be available to my sales colleagues in their CRM. And then I go to the capabilities heat map and I'm like, okay, in order to do this, I need to be able to ingest batch sources, transform batch sources in my data warehouse. I need to be able to visualize and dashboard stuff in Salesforce. I need to be able to do reverse ETL, so from data warehouse back to the system where they operate. I need to enable data science experiments that's creating the customer profile itself, and I might eventually need other things as well that will go into say security and governance. I will need some data catalog so that my colleagues can look up to understand what does that customer profile actually mean, how do we create it, what are some weights of that profile, stuff like this. I will probably need to sort out PII management. So really map out what are these underlying capabilities that are going to lead me to that successful experience. And same way as before, I mark, which of these I'm doing well, I'm not doing well, or I'm doing really well, like on this scale. And if I know I want to improve in one of the experiences, I probably will know that I'll need to improve in some of these capabilities as we go, as part of the projects that get me to there. So I hope that this framework that I use for this part of product management in data was helpful for you. That's really everything that I wanted to show you today. And I am really curious about any questions, comments, concerns, or anything that you might have, either now or I think Kevin, feel free to forward my email. You can always write me on email or LinkedIn as well. So
yeah. If you happy to share the slide deck, I will send it out to everybody that registered and attended today. And I'll put your details in there so they can ask any questions. But if people have got questions now, please do fire away.
Yeah, do it. I'm gonna stop sharing. All right. Well, I can finally open the chat as well. So. Yeah. I just see Erica saying, I think greater care needed to test data products similar to formalized software testing regime. Absolutely. Yeah, and when I didn't explicitly talk about that here because I wanted it to be more like a higher level overview. But if on the last slide with the capabilities, it's actually somewhere there, because for me, we shouldn't have a data platform that doesn't allow us for good testing, whatever we mean under testing. And I absolutely agree with that. Yeah. Cool. I see a comment here that in big organizations, it might be challenging with so many people to do this road mapping. I think it's definitely then like you will have to have conversations on who are the most relevant stakeholders and what are the sizes of these forums for intakes or for these discussions to happen. Like what is the most impactful way. So that's there is lots of, that's the thing, like that's why I'm saying like product management, because there is lots of that management work, and by that I don't mean line management, but lots of this, you need to have lots of conversations that lead to having clarity on both the products and the process. So that's where the challenge lies rather than in the technical implementation. I still see someone typing. So, oh, you liked it. Thanks a lot, everyone. So yes, I hope this was helpful. Feel free to contact me via any channel. As Kevin said, you're gonna get my email or find me on LinkedIn. We can absolutely chat about this. I am very passionate about it, and I'm really testing out lots of approaches. So any input is very, very welcome. Yes, thank you all as well. It was really lovely. Hope you have great weekend plans. And yeah, I hope to see you at some point soon, maybe in person, some of you. Thank you, everyone.